Welcome back, everybody, to a deep dive. We are diving into something I think a lot of us struggle with, and that's breaking addictions.
Yeah.
We've got some fascinating sources today that really kind of get into how these stubborn habits form in our brains and why they are just so hard to kick.
Right.
We're going to be exploring some science-backed strategies for rewiring those neural pathways.
Yeah.
I
It's incredible how much our brains are involved in this whole process.
Absolutely.
We're going to unpack things like the dopamine roller coaster. Have you heard of that?
I have.
We'll talk about that. And then the nothing rule.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And we'll even explore a 10-minute trick to outsmart those cravings.
Oh, I'm all about that 10-minute trick. So let's start with how these addictions actually hook us in the first place.
Yeah, okay.
One of the sources that you gave me described it kind of like the soreness you feel after an intense workout,
Mm-hmm.
If you don't expect it,
Yeah.
you might think something's wrong,
Right.
but it's a sign of progress.
Exactly. And that's a great analogy because what's happening is our brains are reacting to these pleasurable activities.
Okay.
And those activities are causing a spike in dopamine, which makes us feel amazing.
Feel good.
But when that activity stops, the dopamine levels actually drop below the baseline. So we're left feeling kind of crummy.
I see. So our brains kind of get used to these dopamine spikes
Yeah.
from the addictive behavior.
Yeah.
And then when we stop, we just crave more to kind of feel better.
Exactly. And that's exactly how we get stuck on this dopamine roller coaster that the source was talking about.
Yeah, makes sense.
Each time we indulge, we experience that spike followed by the crash.
Yeah.
And it creates this cycle of craving and indulgence.
Oh, man. So the higher the spike,
Yes.
the lower the crash, and the more we want to repeat that behavior.
Precisely.
So this source talks about a strategy called the nothing rule.
Okay.
Instead of trying to immediately alleviate that discomfort of low dopamine,
Right.
it says we should just sit with it.
Yeah.
What does it even mean?
Yeah. Well, it sounds super counterintuitive, right?
It does.
But the nothing rule is really about retraining our brains.
Yeah.
Instead of reaching for something immediately to soothe that discomfort, we just allow ourselves to experience it.
Huh.
And that uncomfortable feeling is actually a sign that the dopamine levels are starting to recalibrate.
So it's like a dopamine detox.
Exactly.
So instead of reaching for that hit, we ride out the wave.
You got it.
How does that actually help break the cycle?
It allows the brain to kind of hit the reset button.
Okay.
The source even says that as we practice this, those activities we used to find boring,
Like what?
like reading a book or taking a walk, they actually start to feel more enjoyable again.
Interesting. So we rediscover the simple things.
That don't give us that crazy dopamine rush
Gotcha,
and
Jim.
trash.
So how long does this whole reset process take?
It's really different for everybody.
Okay.
There's no set timeline, but what's important to remember is that discomfort is part of the process.
I can imagine.
And this source actually offers a really helpful tip.
I call the 10-minute trick
Ooh, I like it.
to kind of manage those cravings during the detox.
The 10-minute trick. Tell me more.
All right, so let's say a craving hits.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to fight it or giving in right away,
Mm-hmm.
you tell yourself, okay, I can have it in 10 minutes.
Oh.
That reduces that feeling of deprivation, which
Okay.
often makes the craving even worse.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it gives you a chance to actually evaluate the craving.
Hmm.
Is it really as strong as you thought it was?
Yeah.
Can you wait a little bit longer?
That's smart.
So you're not necessarily giving in,
Right.
but you're not denying yourself completely.
Right. So it's more manageable.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, the source suggests that delaying that gratification, even for a short time, it can weaken the urge.
Interesting.
It's about taking control instead of letting the craving control you.
So it's like taking the power away from the craving.
Yeah, you create space between the urge and the action.
Okay.
And that is a huge step in rewiring those pathways. I like it. So we've got the dopamine roller coaster. We've got the nothing rule to detox.
Yes.
And the 10-minute trick to manage the cravings.
Right.
What else can we do to rewire our brains for long-term change?
Well, one of the sources talks about this idea of habit replacement.
Okay, I like it.
So think of your brain like a forest,
Okay.
and there are these paths carved out by repeated actions. So addiction creates this well-worn path that your brain automatically follows when triggered.
Interesting.
Habit replacement involves creating new, healthier pathways.
So instead of trying to completely erase that well-worn path, which sounds impossible,
Yeah.
we can build new paths that lead to healthier behaviors.
Precisely trying to just stop an addictive behavior can be incredibly challenging because those pathways are so deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on getting rid of the old path, You just create a new one.
I like that.
It's like paving a new road in that forest.
Can you give me an example of how this works in real life? Like, let's say somebody's struggling with video game addiction.
Okay.
How could they apply this?
So let's say every time you get the urge to play video games.
Which is the trigger.
That's the trigger.
Okay.
You decide to go for a run instead.
Okay.
The run becomes the new, healthier behavior.
Okay.
The key is to find a replacement that's enjoyable enough to give you a little bit of a dopamine boost.
Gotcha.
But that isn't harmful or addictive in itself.
Right.
So it could be exercise.
Yeah.
Learning a new skill, spending time with loved ones, anything that gives you a sense of accomplishment.
I like it.
So as you consistently choose the run over the video game, you're strengthening that new pathway,
Yeah.
making it more likely you'll default to that healthier behavior over time.
It's not just about willpower then. It's actually about rewiring our brains by creating these new habits. That's empowering.
It is.
One of the sources mentioned this idea of changing our self-identity to break free from addiction. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's where it gets even more interesting. It's about shifting our self-perception on a deeper level. So for example, let's say you see yourself as a smoker.
Okay.
That identity comes with a whole set of beliefs and behaviors.
Right.
Like, I need a cigarette to relax, or I'm not a real smoker unless I have one first thing in the morning. And these beliefs actually reinforce the addiction.
So if I change how I see myself, my brain will naturally start looking for behaviors that support that new image.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with the person you want to become.
Okay.
So instead of smoker, you start to see yourself as a non-smoker, someone who values their health and well-being.
I like that.
You've changed the story you tell yourself.
That's powerful.
And that can make a huge difference.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
We've covered some really powerful strategies for rewiring our brains. One of the sources went beyond just the neuroscience and talked about the deeper roots of why we get stuck in these cycles.
Right.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah. This source digs into the role of deception and temptation in the addiction cycle.
Okay.
It's not just a physical craving. There's often a mental and even spiritual component involved.
It's like we're tricked into believing that the addiction will satisfy us.
Yeah.
How do we address that?
Well, the source suggests that the deception often starts with believing the lie that a particular substance or behavior will bring lasting fulfillment.
Okay.
Then comes the temptation to act on that lie.
Right.
And if we repeatedly give in, it becomes a habit and can eventually turn into a physical addiction.
It's a slippery slope.
It is.
So it's not just about fighting the physical cravings.
Yep.
It's about recognizing and resisting the deception behind those cravings.
Absolutely.
What strategies does this source give us for combating that aspect of it?
This source talks about the importance of connecting with something larger than ourselves, a higher power, if you will.
Okay.
It could be through prayer meditation, studying spiritual texts. The idea is to find strength and guidance outside of ourselves.
So it's about tapping into a source of strength beyond our own willpower.
Exactly.
That sounds really powerful when you're dealing with those cravings.
It can be.
This source also emphasizes self-reflection as a crucial step.
Yes.
It's about understanding why we're reaching for that substance or behavior in the first place.
Right. What need are we trying to fulfill? What void are we trying to fill?
So insightful. It's not enough to just white-knuckle it.
No.
We have to examine why.
Exactly.
What are some practical ways to go about this?
Well, yeah, the source recommends things like journaling, talking to a therapist or counselor, or even just having honest conversations with trusted friends or family members. It's about exploring those deeper emotional needs and finding healthier ways to meet them.
So instead of reaching for that cigarette when I'm stressed,
Yeah.
maybe I need to learn some relaxation techniques
Right.
or find a healthy way to express those emotions.
Absolutely.
It's about addressing the root cause rather than the symptom.
You got it. And don't forget, there's also the physical aspect of addiction, the changes that happen in our brains.
Right.
And for that, this source highlights the importance of practical steps, such as accountability discipline and potentially even professional help.
Sounds like breaking free from addiction requires a multi-pronged approach.
It does.
It's not just about willpower or rewiring the brain. It's about addressing the spiritual, the emotional, and the physical aspects of addiction.
I couldn't agree more. This source emphasizes that it's not about being perfect or never slipping up. It's about having a plan, a support system, and the willingness to keep trying even when it gets tough.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've gone from the neuroscience of dopamine to the spiritual roots of addiction.
Yeah.
We've explored some pretty practical strategies for breaking these bad habits. One of your sources brought up something that really resonated with me. Though They stressed the importance of dealing with addiction early and aggressively.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, what's interesting is those neural pathways that are associated with addiction become more ingrained over time.
Makes sense.
The longer an addiction goes on, the deeper those pathways become, and the harder it can be to break free.
So it's like walking that same path through the forest every day. Eventually, it becomes so worn you can't stray from it.
That's a great analogy.
And this source also suggested some pretty drastic measures for addressing addiction aggressively. Things like changing our environment, limiting access to temptation.
Yeah,
Those can be difficult steps,
they can.
but they might be necessary for some people.
But sometimes.
That makes sense if you're constantly surrounded by those triggers.
Right.
It's going to be so much harder to resist.
Absolutely.
What about this idea of modifying our identity, which the source mentioned? How does that fit into breaking free?
Well, this goes beyond just changing our behaviors. It's about shifting our self-perception.
Okay.
Remember that example we talked about, smoker versus non-smoker?
Yeah.
If you keep seeing yourself as a smoker, you're more likely to continue smoking.
Because it aligns with that self-image.
Exactly.
I like that. It's like giving your brain a new set of blueprints.
It is.
We've talked a lot about breaking bad habits. What about forming good ones? Is that the same process in reverse?
You know, it is, in many ways, the same principles that apply to breaking bad habits apply to forming good ones.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about habit replacement?
Mm-hmm.
That's a key element in forming new habits.
So instead of focusing on what we're trying to stop,
Yeah,
we shift our attention to what we want to start doing.
precisely.
How we go about that?
Just like breaking a bad habit requires understanding triggers and cravings, forming a good habit requires identifying cues and rewards that will motivate us.
Okay.
So let's say you want to start exercising regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, I'm going to work out every day, which can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
Think about specific cues and rewards that will help you follow through.
So the cue could be something like putting on my workout clothes right when I wake up. And then the reward could be like enjoying a healthy smoothie after my workout.
Exactly. You've created a clear trigger that initiates the behavior
Okay.
and a reward that reinforces it.
I like it.
As you repeat that pattern,
Yeah.
you start to build that neural pathway.
So I'm training my brain to associate those positive feelings with exercising.
That's the idea.
Does it really work that simply?
The source suggests it does. The more you repeat that pattern, the stronger that association becomes.
Interesting.
Another helpful technique is habit stacking.
Habit stacking.
Have you heard of this?
I have not.
It's about attaching a new habit to an existing one.
Oh.
For example, if you already have a habit of brushing your teeth every morning, you could stack a new habit, like meditating for 5 minutes, onto that existing habit.
So I would brush my teeth and then immediately sit down and meditate for 5 minutes.
Exactly.
I like that. It's like piggybacking on an already established routine.
Right. Your brain's already wired to automatically brush your teeth, so it becomes easier to tack on that new behavior.
You make sense.
The source emphasized one more thing: consistency is key.
Of course.
There will be days when you don't feel like it,
Oh, yeah.
but the more you stick with those new habits, the more ingrained they become.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of addiction and habit formation. It's amazing how much our brains are involved in these processes, both good and bad.
It is, and the great news is, with a little understanding of how our brains work, we can take control of our habits and create positive change.
Absolutely. So to all of you listening out there, we want to hear from you. What resonated most with you from this deep dive? What's one small step you can take today to start breaking free from a habit that's holding you back? Or maybe there's a positive habit you've been wanting to form. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this episode a like if you found it helpful. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.